Oh my goodness, here we are. Yesterday, I walked on to the stage and told you that I was your guide for the festival. But what I didn't tell you was that I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I laughed here, I took notes, I genuinely reconsidered a lot of life choices. And this park is so beautiful. I mean, can we just acknowledge this gym? I mean, this is the best place to do this. I actually took the train down from LA to here, and it was so pretty. It was so nice just looking at the beach and people surfing and the sun. And then I get to be here in the park and see all the sculptures. And I was like, oh my God, why did I pick LA? This is so nice. And the food has been so good this time, like this week, it's been so good. And the drinks. I was supposed to be focused and professional. Instead, I was just like standing next to catering and being like, I know the owner. Can I have one more? But here's the thing, all of that, the food, the sunshine, the dancing that I did not plan to do, none of it would have meant anything without you. This room, the way you showed up, the way you listened, the conversations that I watched you have in between sessions, that was the real program. Thank you to the Prebis Foundation for creating something this intentional and generous. I have emceed a lot of events, and this one was different. This one challenged us to consider our personal role in meeting this moment, building a stronger community, challenging the status quo, and making time to sustain our bodies and the work ahead. And thank you for laughing at all my jokes, even the ones that were just okay. You didn't have to do that, but I appreciate it. And we have one more special guest speaker who will close out the festival with a powerful call to action. But in the spirit of not ending with logistics, I'm going to tell you some stuff now before they come on. We hope that you'll join us in the Sculpture Garden and Panama 66 for our closing cocktail reception with a performance by Third Coast Jazz Band and the opportunity to continue writing your intention cards. It has been an absolute pleasure being your guide these last 2 days. I do have to bring up one more friend of mine. He has been the driving force behind the festival and from the very beginning, and now he gets to bring this whole thing home. Please give it up one final time for the president, CEO of Prebis Foundation, Grant Oliphant.
Thank you. All right, thank you, by the way. We are going to end super strong, and not with me. The next speaker is going to be the most amazing and perfect way to end. But there are a couple of things I do want to say before we get to her. And the first is simply to add my thanks to all of you for being here and taking the time and making the space in your very busy lives to do this. I also want to thank and ask you to help me to thank the San Diego Museum of Art, the Old Globe Theater, and everybody in this community in the past who invested their time and energy into building this amazing park. All right, so I was sitting with what I heard over the course of the past 2 days, and here's what I want to share, because you remember I opened with the questions about what are we collectively going to do in this community to build the kind of future we want for San Diego, and the question about what you personally are going to do. And I don't have the answer to that for you. I hope that as a result of these 2 days, you have some really cool ideas. You have some partnerships that you're beginning to think about in different ways that you're thinking about the challenges and the issue. That would, to me, be success. That people walk out of this room on fire with the desire to do some things in an even heightened way to build the community that we all dream is possible here. For me, what came up across the course of this conference as I was sitting with it this morning was a quote from the psychologist Tara Brach. And I know it doesn't fit, right, in terms of the content, but I often think about something she said which is that the spaces where we are seen and heard are holy places. And I think across the course of this entire conference, what we have been wrestling with is how we collectively and individually create a community where we create holy spaces more intentionally for each other. I mean, you just think about Barry with his Ghosts of the Theater making room to hear what the arts and what the past are whispering to us about what we need to do in the present day. Thinking about the playwrights panel and what they shared with us about this fundamental question of whose stories ultimately get told. The journalists panel who flipped that on its head, looking at the radical ways in which technology is changing the context of storytelling in the news sphere, and really wrestling with questions of whose stories not only get told, but get heard, and whose stories get believed. I was thinking about the conversation that Saul and Fabi had about reaching students and their thirst for knowledge in the spaces where they are, so that we're hearing them in a very literal context by reaching them with the education and the growth and the learning that they crave in the ways that they are able to and need to consume it today. By the way, every single performance in this festival, I think, underscored for me the very real faces and look of the people that we're talking about when we're thinking about making sure that everyone is seen and heard. I was incredibly proud of our performances at the beginning of the session yesterday and at the beginning of the session today. The way in which young people stepped up to give us the grace of space where they were heard, but we were also sitting with our own truths as they performed, and the reality of them as the future people we are trying to help create a better world for. That was a really powerful thing for me. And of course the artists from the Pittsburgh Symphony who, Pittsburgh Symphony, oh my God. 30 years, guys, come on. Do you know I'm in so much trouble with Martha right now? All right. I blush easily, so I must be on fire right now. Tom Friedman, he literally said it, that what we have to do is listen, and we have to go to the edge where we are willing to listen to the humiliation and pain that other people feel, and then to help them find the dignity that they deserve through being heard. We heard from, and then Tom Friedman also talked about how we basically need to do that for community, and his lovely mangroves metaphor, which really, you don't have to remember his 4 rules, just remember the rule of mutuality. What he was talking about there was how we support and sustain each other. And the creating spaces where we actually can feel seen and heard in community is a major takeaway that he shared with us. Mike Posner really brought it down to an individual level and talked about whether we can have the grace to see and hear what is going on inside of ourselves. Actually, we just heard Rupi say a very similar but very different version of the same thing, that we have to take the moment and give ourselves the space, the holy place, to hear what's going on inside of ourselves. Eric Topol gave a very scientific version of that when he talked about listening to our own bodies. And, I think sometimes when we talk about hope in the context of grand ideas, but what we saw in his presentation was that by doing a better job of listening to the systems in the human body, what science is doing is actually moving forward the quality of human health. And I think that's an extraordinary example of what we can achieve through our creativity when we believe that we can make the space to do that kind of thing. Julie Platt and I had a incredibly honest and heartfelt conversation. And what I really enjoyed in talking with her was her candor about the importance of voicing pain and also of making room to hear other people's pain. And oh, by the way, not assuming that we know what they're going through, because so often we don't create the space to hear that, but we rush past it and say, oh, I know what you must feel. And she asked us not to do that, and I think that was an important message. Natalie and Chef Rufo, such a delightful conversation between Natalie Kitroff and Chef Ibarra. And they talked about being able to make room to hear the call for home, but also through that, through very specific things like food and family and culture, to see something universal for all of us around that transcends borders, around the value of those qualities in human life. Brett Egan gave a very serious talk and a stunningly articulate one and scholarly one that so many of those quotes I'll be sitting with them for a while. But he held up the notion of finding time and space for the human, even in this radical transformation in our society. And I had a thought while I was sitting listening to him that it sometimes seems as though we are just that human beings, the quality of being humanists, we're just going to be swept off the table by these very rich men with their very powerful machines and the forces that they have unleashed. And damn it, we are not. And one reason we're not is precisely because of what Brett laid out in terms of the artists. Rupi, you just heard, but the way she opened with broken English, the image that gave of what it's like to be an immigrant, the stories that we sometimes forget in the political realm, but that become so alive through art and through poetry. I thought that was going to be my takeaway from her talk, but then she veered into the whole experience of reacquainting herself with her creativity, which Brett also talked about. And if there is another takeaway from this conference, I hope it will be that inside each of us is this, what the Bible called the still quiet voice of being human. And somewhere inside each of us, that voice speaks and asks to be heard. And it is the voice of creativity. It is the voice of the mangroves. It is the voice of common sense and making good choices. So let me end with this. I learned, and I think a number of us learned because it came up. Several people asked me if Rupi and Valerie are related because of the last name, and they're not in the sense that that we might usually think. But there is a wonderful naming tradition in the Sikh tradition that at least is worth mentioning in the context of this conference. So the 10th guru of the Sikh tradition declared that all men would carry the name Singh and all women would carry the name Kaur. And the name Singh means lion, the name Kaur means princess. And the notion was to make it clear in a culture dominated by caste and difference that human beings are fundamentally the same, and we all carry extraordinary qualities within us of being royal, and that there is no gradation among us around that. And so, although the naming tradition has faded over time, the idea persists, and I can't imagine a better person to share the deeper truth behind that than the speaker that we'll be finishing with. So with that, let me turn this over to Valarie Kaur.
I am so grateful to be here with you, San Diego. How do we meet this moment in history? I believe that love, revolutionary love, is the call of our times. And I have seen that love here in your city. I've seen it in the space between you in this extraordinary gathering. And I saw it this morning at the Islamic Center of San Diego. I was there to deliver letters of love and solidarity that we had collected from across the country, and we had bound them in books to deliver to the mosque. When I arrived, there were flowers and cards and signs all spread in front of the building, which many of you have left there. It was so beautiful. When I went inside the mosque, it was just before Friday noon prayer, so it was very quiet. The women elders were rolling out the rugs. The young man was studying on the step. The uncles were opening up the boxes of dates. And I found the Imam, Imam Taha, and I handed him the books, 1,000 letters we handed him, and it was this beautiful, solemn moment, and my teammate is rolling camera so that we can present the books in this beautiful, reverent moment, and in the middle of the presentation, an elder comes straight up to me saying, take, with his hands full of candy. And the Imam starts to apologize, and we stop the camera. I'm like, no, it's okay. And I take the candy, and the Imam says, this is our community. This uncle, he hands out candy every day. I have so many in my desk. And he laughs, and I laugh. And I look around, and I realize that 11 days after a massacre, here they all are, showing up with their generosity and their humility and their sweetness. And as I was leaving the mosque, there were neighbors coming in with signs of peace and comfort bears and more dates and water. It was love inside. It was love outside. It was the kind of love that carries us through the impossible. You see, revolutionary love is the choice to see no stranger, to risk ourselves for one another, to leave no one outside our circle of care. And that is the kind of love I believe we need here in San Diego and all across the country to meet this moment in history. In order to fully meet this moment, we must be brave enough to tell the truth. Authoritarianism is a method of rule that suppresses civil rights and freedoms in order to concentrate power in the hands of a single leader or an elite few. Across time and place, authoritarians consolidate their power by waging campaigns of dehumanization, calling entire groups of people outsiders who need to be purged in order to make the nation great again. I believe that what we are seeing in this country is the consolidation of authoritarian power in a way that we have never seen before on this soil, fueled by white nationalist rage, producing an enormous climate of hate and violence. History tells us that without a social movement, we have a 7.5% chance of defeating authoritarian capture. 7. But with a non-violent social movement that activates all parts of society, including working people in unions, our chances go up to 80%. What does that look like? What does it look like to build a strong enough movement that all of us can see ourselves in? A movement of dignity and liberation, of kindness, of care. I want to share with you the blueprint that I saw in the city of Minneapolis. I was invited to go to Minneapolis in January by faith leaders who wanted us to see what was happening in the wake of the murder of Renee Good. And when I was invited, I have to say, I thought I was prepared for what I would see in Minneapolis. Los Angeles is my home city. Los Angeles is the first city that this administration chose to deploy ICE, a force of massed armed men with a budget that exceeds that of the militaries of most nations on earth. So I saw my neighbors disappeared, abducted in broad daylight, children terrorized, families ripped apart, and our protests were met with astonishing military force. I saw my fellow protesters beaten, maimed, trampled by cavalry. I thought I was prepared for what I would see in Minneapolis. I did not know what it felt like to move through a city that was occupied. 3,000 federal agents in those streets meant that the city looks completely normal, the street looks completely normal, but you can be this close to brutality in an instant. Every person I talked to had been brutalized by federal agents or knew someone who had. People of color, immigrants, legal residents, US citizens, indigenous people. I needed a moment of quiet. So I chose, on the morning of the great action on January 23rd, I chose what I thought was the safe option. I went with a group of faith leaders to the pilgrimage site, George Floyd Memorial Square. Now, George Floyd Memorial Square has been transformed since 2020 into a site of love, flowers and candles and community gathering. Constantly, I was here with George's auntie, Angela Harrelson. The last time I was here, I said, Angela, how do you have the courage to keep telling your nephew's story? And she says, well, I think about his last words. I'm a nurse. I know how difficult it is to speak when you cannot breathe. And I thought what we heard as agony in those words, Angela heard as courage. I can't breathe. So I'm back now with Angela, and I ask her, what does it mean to you that Renee Good was murdered less than a mile away from where your nephew was choked to death? And she said, it's re-traumatizing. It's re-traumatizing. It's a white woman this time. It's about humanity now, she says. It was always about humanity. And I say, Angela, how do we keep going? And she says, you just need a mustard seed of faith. Just a mustard seed of faith. I said, okay. So I'm standing there in the cold. I mean, there are icicles on our eyelashes. It was so cold. And trying to find my mustard seed. And the clergy get back on the bus. And I said, I'm going to meet you all at the church. I just need to stand here for a moment longer. When the clergy got back on the bus, headed back to the church, that is when an ICE vehicle was spotted trailing the bus. ICE had been following us that entire morning, from one pilgrimage site to another. A 20-year-old woman driving in a car named Clay notices the ICE vehicle. And she drives up behind the bus, takes out her phone to watch, to witness. Take a breath here, everybody. ICE spots her, blocks her car in, shatters her windows, starts to try to pull her out of the car. She is holding on to the steering wheel. Her partner is holding on to her. No orders to disperse, no sheer intimidation. Whistles start going off in the street, and neighbors start to pour out and take out their phones to watch, to witness. And there were enough people in the street that ICE gives up. There is glass in her eyes, her cheek, her throat. She's shaking. She and her partner, they make it to the church where our community members and the revolutionary love movement, they're the nurses, Corey and Anisi, who treat her. And by the time I find them, they are shaking as I wrap my arms around them. The next morning, Alex Preddy was murdered a few miles away from us. Minnesota has become the new ground zero for the scale of brutality this administration is willing to inflict on immigrants, on people of color, and on the neighbors who stand up to protect them. But Alex Preddy and Renee Good were murdered, doing what tens of thousands of Minnesotans agreed to do, were trained to do, which is to watch, to witness. Witnessing is a shield. It says you cannot do this to our neighbors in the dark. You cannot disappear our people and call it routine. And witnessing has now become something that requires so much courage. But Alex Preddy and Renee Good, their murders are an extension of the violence that people of color have long survived on this soil. When they call you illegal, when they call you savage, when they call you criminal, when they call you terrorist or domestic terrorist, they are saying we can do anything to you or allow anything to be done to you and call it your fault. But that requires the rest of us being silent. And Minnesota decided not to be silent. Let's think about this story for a moment. Faith leaders who were sheltering hundreds and thousands of immigrant families called us to come and witness and protect them. ICE targets us. A woman who does not know us shows up to witness and protect us. ICE brutalizes her. And then neighbors who she does not know flood the street to watch, to witness, to protect her. None of us knew each other. None of us had to know each other for us to be willing to say, you are my brother, you are my sister, you are my own. I choose to risk myself for you. I choose to see no stranger. I saw that kind of love in action all across Minnesota. And this is what I don't think the news headlines really conveyed to the rest of us here in California, that Minnesota really created an underground civil society, teaching children in underground hybrid classrooms because schools were not safe, delivering groceries and supplies and menstrual pads to families because grocery stores were not safe, providing midwifery to mamas and babies because hospitals were not safe. There was a woman who was late to our convening because she was delivering breast milk to a 3-month-old whose mother had just been taken. All of these acts of care. In response to every act of brutality, there were hundreds of acts of care. And it looked like this. With every act of care, the roots under the surface, the network of care that connected them became stronger, more fortified, more powerful. And everyone had a role. The most visible folks were the ones documenting, those in the front, or the ones marching in the streets. But then everyone had a role. There were people who were gathering to comfort each other, to care for each other's children, to feed each other, to hold each other through the impossible. Everyone had a role. It was more than half of the city of Minneapolis played some kind of role in this act of massive non-compliance. Little Liam in his bunny hat, 5-year-old, who was taken and shipped to a detention center, he was taken while we were there on the ground. And what brought him back were those roots, those connections that were unseen, that maintained strong. This picture, this is our strongest resistance to authoritarianism. But it is also so much more than resistance. This is a picture of what the whole world could be. A world where I see your child as mine and you see my child as yours. It is a picture where people are practicing the world we want in the space between us. This is love in action. And this kind of love is what authoritarians cannot see, cannot understand, and can never defeat. This is why I believe revolutionary love is the call of our times. You see, the root of tyranny is lovelessness. They are depending on the rest of us to retreat into our fear, into our despair, into our privilege. But love, revolutionary love, is the choice to risk ourselves for one another, to show up with whistles when they have guns. And that kind of revolutionary love is what we are all called to live into now, when so much is at stake. For beloveds, I believe it is going to get darker. I believe that authoritarians only succeed when they capture all democratic institutions, military and the courts, business and tech, the legislative, nonprofits, universities, faith communities. That's you. That's us. The warmongers, the tyrants, the authoritarians, the tech oligarchs, they want us to believe that we are helpless, that only those who control the levers of wealth and weapons have true power in this world. But there are more of us than ever before. There are millions of us who know that peace and justice and liberation run together. The majority of us oppose authoritarianism. We are the majority. We must act like the majority. And that means building communities that are so anchored in love, so activated by joy that the cruelty that drives authoritarianism cannot take root. It means practicing the world we want in the space between us, a world that is green and whole, safe and free. It means holding up a dream of a world where we truly see no stranger, a dream that we can enact in the space between us. Our dream is more powerful than their nightmare. And that brings me to you, San Diego. You see, the mass shooting that took place just a few minutes away from here, it is not an isolated incident. For the last 25 years since September 11th, our communities, Muslim, Sikh, Arab American communities, have been targets of hate violence and state violence. The two are always tethered together. Every time there is mass surveillance, detentions, deportations, forever wars and genocidal campaigns abroad, we see hate violence increase on our soil. And we've been to so many memorials that they are starting to blur together. And now those who profit from that kind of hate are seated at the highest seats of government in our country, enacting an authoritarian agenda that depends on us to hate or to let hate happen. But when I look back on the last 25 years, there were always those who did what the nation as a whole did not. They crossed the line to tend the vigil. They brought the flowers. They brought the letters. They came with the donations. Anytime people who have no obvious reason to love one another grieve together like that, they give rise to new relationships, even revolutions. That is the kind of love that you are unlocking here in this city. If you haven't already been to the Islamic Center of San Diego, this is your invitation to do so. And you can ask yourself, what does it mean for us to practice that kind of love there and in our neighborhood and in every space that we move through? Can San Diego be a beacon, a liberation experiment? I believe that our liberation experiments are not like soap bubbles that pop and disappear. They're like sound waves that carry on into the future. What does it mean for you all to sing your song of love? And revolutionary love means leaving no one outside of our circle of care, right? I had this artwork commissioned by Jennifer Bloomer, the artist, and I said, you see those ice agents? Okay, I know it looks like icicles beneath their feet, but I believe that those are potentials for roots. It's why the people of Minneapolis were roaming the streets and singing choirs, singing at the foot of hotels where ICE agents were. You can change your mind. This is courageous labor. And it's not for all of us, but for those of us who are willing, it is courageous labor. When I was in the streets of Los Angeles We as faith leaders put our bodies between protesters and the National Guard. We faced men with machine guns with flowers. We brought flowers in our arms. We put flowers down at the steps of the detention center where they were keeping our people last summer. We came every week, singing with flowers in our arms. And finally, I looked up at the ICE agents in front of the building and I said, they are our brothers too, even if they've forgotten it. And so at one of these vigils, I finally lifted my gaze, I picked up my flowers, and I went and placed flowers at their feet, one by one. It was so hard. That first agent, he wouldn't even look at me, I couldn't look at him, but that second agent, maybe it was the helmet that looked like a bicycle helmet. I was able to look at him, and he looked at me, and then the next agent, skin brown like me, I thought, why are you on that side of the line, brother? I left a flower for him. You can change your mind. I turned to leave, and as I'm walking away, I hear, ma'am. My body starts to shake. I was brutalized by the NYPD 20 years ago. That the body remembers. I start to shake. I turn around, and he goes like this. And I go back to him, shaking. And he looks at me and he says, thank you. What do I do? In this very spot, you held your baton over me. In this very spot, you pointed your rifle at me. And now you're extending your hand to me. What do I do? Revolutionary love is the choice to block your actions with one hand and extend the other, with the hope that you might one day take it, or your children might one day take it. For the brief high of domination is nothing compared to the infinite love and joy of true community. So I took his hand. I don't know whether that officer is going to stop hurting our people, but I want to be the one who believes in that possibility. That is who I want to be in the story. And here's the thing, after those vigils, bringing those flowers, the images of our nonviolent resistance began to spread all across the country, to Portland, to Chicago, and to Minneapolis. We can make each other brave, we can inspire each other. And here's the thing, the front line is not only in those streets, the front line is anywhere where we are called to be brave with our love. What is your front line? Is it your boardroom, your classroom, your kitchen table, your own heart? What is your front line? And what does it mean to show up at your front line with flowers? Beloveds, I believe each of us has a role that only we can play in this moment in history. I've spent the last 20 years of my life organizing around hate. I will spend the rest of my life organizing around love. And I want to organize with all of you. We are building a movement in this country. We've been building it for 10 years, but in the last 2 years, we've been to 65 cities all across this country, including from Minneapolis to Los Angeles, building this movement of love, calling for a revolutionary love to be practiced in the space between us. This is not a 4-year campaign. It is a 40-year vision to shift culture and consciousness in this country, to birth America anew. And so I come with a gift, a tool that I wish to put in your hands. On your seat, you will find something that looks like this. We've heard the call to love for thousands of years, haven't we? Thousands of years. Why then has it not already transformed the world? This question of how do we put the love ethic into practice seized me a decade ago. I was gripped by it. I am a Harvard-trained theologian and a Yale-trained lawyer, which simply means I know how to do my research. So We brought together a team of researchers in neuroscience and ethics and psychology and history, and I poured through the history of social movements and our own ancestral wisdom. I poured through the data, and what I began to see are practices of revolutionary love that I imagine as points on a compass. This compass is what I wish to put into your hands now. I'm going to teach you how to use it, and as you listen, just take whatever it is that you need in your life for this moment. Are you ready? All right. We're going to start with definitions. So love is more than a rush of feeling that comes and goes, ebbs and flows. Love is sweet labor, fierce, bloody, imperfect, demanding, life-giving, a choice we make again and again. And when we choose to enter into that kind of labor for others, even our opponents and ourselves, then love becomes revolutionary. The way the compass works is that you point it to whomever you wish to practice loving. You see that outer ring? Revolutionary love for others, opponents, and ourselves. We're going to start with that first slice of the compass. How do we love others? This practice is called See No Stranger, and it begins with wonder. What might it mean for you to move through your day and every face that you see, say in your mind, sister, brother, sibling, cousin, you are a part of me I do not yet know. Can you say that with me? You are a part of me I do not yet know. It sounds so simple, but the way we see shapes whose stories we hear, whose grief we let in, what policies we support, and what leaders we elect. Demagogues succeed by shutting down our ability to wonder about each other as part of us. And so wondering about each other is not only a powerful anti-racist practice, it is an anti-fascist tool. What does it look like for you to be brave with your wonder? Now you might say, well, if I see their children as my children, it is too much. There is too much grief, and you're right. This next practice on the compass is to grieve with others. There is no fixing grief. There is only bearing it. And only when we bear it together do we survive it. You don't need to know people in order to grieve with them. You grieve with them in order to know them. And that is the kind of grieving together we're seeing at the Islamic Center right now, that we're seeing in San Diego right now. When you grieve with other people, when you grieve with other communities, then you gain the information for how to fight for them. And you're hearing it from the Muslim community, right? That the hate speech, the extremist propaganda, the policies targeting immigrants and people of color, that is what is producing the climate that is fueling the hate. And that is what we need to address. That's what we need to fight. That's what it means to grieve with a community truly. Wondering about others, grieving with others, fighting for others, these are the ingredients for deep solidarity. Shallow solidarity is rooted in the logic of exchange. I show up for you, so you show up for me. But deep solidarity is rooted in love. I show up for you because you are my sister, you are my brother, you are my beloved, and that kind of love lasts long after the news cycle moves on, right? The cameras have already moved on. That kind of love is what will heal the city and what will rebirth the nation. So what are you ready to be braver with? What does it mean for you to be brave with your grief? What does it mean to stretch yourself for who you fight for and how you fight? You might ask, but what about who we're fighting against? So now we take that compass and we turn it to face an opponent. Now notice I don't use the word enemy. An enemy is a fixed and permanent identity. An opponent is anyone whose ideas, words, or actions oppose your own. They might stay your opponent this whole lifetime, but they might not. And just thinking that is a revolutionary act. This practice is called tend the wound. You see, I've sat with former white supremacists and police officers, my own abusers, and every time I want to hate them, and sometimes I do, when I choose to hear their story, I see their wound, and then it happens. I become free. I'm no longer reacting endlessly from our trauma, but sitting in the seat of our deepest wisdom and responding from there. The two teenage gunmen, what might it mean for some of us if we're ready to even wonder about them? to have compassion for how they were radicalized, how they believed that the only way to find meaning in this world was to choose a path of hate and to lose their lives over it. There are no such thing as monsters in this world. Only human beings who are wounded, who act out of their fear or their insecurity or their greed or their rage. That does not make them any less dangerous, but when we choose to see their wound, they lose all power over us. And we can ask, what does it mean to respond with love? Now, tending the wound, I want to say, it must begin with tending our own wounds. It must begin by honoring our rage. It is okay to feel rage in the face of injustice and mass violence. How many of us have been taught to suppress our rage in the name of love? We've learned the hard way that suppressing our rage only makes us ill and doesn't stop the harm. The solution is not to suppress our rage or to let it explode, but to process our rage in safe containers, to move that energy the way that our ancestors did. Once we move that energy through drumming and shaking and screaming and venting, how do you move that energy? What are your safe containers? Only then can we ask, what information does my rage carry? What does it say about what's important to me? And how do I wish to harness that energy for what I do in the world? I call that harnessed energy divine rage. The aim of divine rage is not vengeance. It is to reorder the world. You might need to stay here. Safe containers for grieving together, for raging together is vital right now when so many people are in harm's way. But if you are safe enough or brave enough for this next practice, what does it mean for us, for you, to wonder about your opponents? To dare to listen to them. Deep listening is an act of surrender. You risk being changed by what you hear. We don't see this kind of listening modeled in our culture, but in the space between us, can we wonder about each other? Why? Why do they say that? Why do they do that? Why? And when you listen deep enough, you see the story, you see the wound, and you can gather that information for what to do next. What might it mean to reimagine an outcome? A future that leaves no one behind, not even them. Oh, for the city of San Diego, what might it mean to reimagine a city that is so invested in a culture of care that we are protecting the children at those mosques, and we are extending care to boys like the two who are radicalized so that they realize that there is a pathway back to community that is far bolder and far brighter than the rabbit hole that they're spiraling down. What does it mean for you, San Diego, to leave no one outside your circle of care? This is long labor. This is courageous labor. Loving others, loving opponents. Our greatest social justice leaders talked a lot about those practices. They didn't teach at length about how to love ourselves. This is the feminist intervention. Yes, this is the wisdom of the midwife, who says, yes, breathe and push. She doesn't say push all the way. No, she says breathe, my love, and then push, and then breathe again. There's a kind of cadence, a kind of rhythm to sustaining our energy, our stamina through any long labor. The labor of raising a family or leading a city or rebirthing a nation. We got to be breathing deeply enough. I was so glad that my sister Rupi was up on stage talking to you about poetry, about how to find that still small space inside of us to breathe. How do you breathe? Do you breathe with poetry, meditation, music? Do you breathe with the sea, with the stars, with the trees, with the sky? How do you breathe every day? Only when we're breathing deeply enough do we find the energy to push and then breathe again and then push again. Each of you are in a push right now. What do you need to show up to that labor? And just like in birthing labor, there's a moment where a voice inside of you says, I can't face the news, I can't go to the mosque, I can't show up to the team right now, I can't, and that's okay. Because every midwife knows that the I can't moment is the sign that something amazing is about to happen. Transition is the final stage in birthing labor. The contractions come so fast, the crises come so fast, there's barely time to breathe. And yet it is the stage that precedes the birth of the new, the birth of new possibilities. And here's the thing, we don't go to battle alone, we don't give birth alone. To survive any transition, we need each other, beloveds, we need each other. Who are you breathing with? Who is helping you push? How are we transitioning ourselves as we're transitioning this nation? And when we do, when we show up every day, breathing and pushing through our labors of love, then there's enough space for the final and most important practice, joy. I've been traveling the world, visiting other societies that have survived authoritarian regimes. I've sat at the feet of Candomblé elders in the houses of Brazil and the feet of Mayan women elders at the edge of mass graves in Guatemala, and every time they're telling a story of atrocity and it's so horrible you think you can't go on, and the next moment they pull out their drums and their musical instruments and they start singing and the women start dancing. Joy is not only our greatest act of resistance, joy is how we practice liberation within us. In our tradition, in the Sikh tradition, it's called Chardikala, ever-rising joy, even in darkness, ever-rising spirits. What does it mean for you to labor in joy every day? You can't force joy. You can only create the conditions to let it come and take you. And when it does, in joy, we see even darkness with new eyes. And so I leave you with a question that I've been asking every single day, a question I hold in my heart. The future is dark. But what if? What if this darkness is not only the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? What if our America is not dead, but a country still waiting to be born? What if the story of America is one long labor, a series of expansions and contractions, and this is our turn in the cycle? What if all of our ancestors are surrounding us now? Those who survived genocide and colonization, slavery and Jim Crow, what if they're whispering in our ear today, right now, you are brave. You are brave. What if this is our greatest transition? What does the midwife say to do? Breathe. Breathe and push. Say it with me. Breathe and push. Again. Breathe and push for justice. Breathe and push for dignity. Breathe and push for liberation. Breathe and push for you. Breathe and push for me. Breathe and push for San Diego. Breathe and push for us. Thank you so much, San Diego. Keep breathing and keep pushing.